Have you ever thought that a woman once called an angel by all of South Korea could become the most ruthless killer? A bizarre marriage, the husband living in a basement in poverty, the wife in a luxurious house. A drowning accident occurring exactly 4 hours before an 800 million won insurance policy expired. Coincidence or a perfect murder plot calculated over many years? Today, we'll explore a shocking case that overshadowed even South Korea's presidential election with its horrifying details. Welcome to the Case Files, where we explore the most intriguing and shocking criminal cases from around the world. Today, we're traveling back to South Korea in 2019 to uncover a case that sparked an unprecedented nationwide manhunt. This is a story of false love, unbridled greed, and the death of a kind-hearted man who trusted the wrong person. In this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the infamous case of the fallen angel, the fatal marriage, and the 800 million won plot. A case that will make you question the nature of humanity and the fragile line between good and evil. Beginning of a tragedy. On June 30th, 2019, Gapyeong Valley, a popular tourist spot about an hour's drive from Seoul, welcomed weekend visitors with its crystal-clear waters and cool air. This is where many Korean families choose to camp and enjoy peaceful moments with nature. Around 3 p.m. that day, a group of 7 friends arrived at the valley to have fun. Among them was Yoon Sang-yeop, 39, a gentle molecular biology engineer with round eyes behind thick glasses. Yoon worked at a major company with a stable income of 64 million won per year, a middle-class income level in South Korea. He was quiet, hard-working, and regarded by colleagues as reliable. Beside Yoon was his wife, Lee Eun-hae, 28, with her beautiful appearance, bright smile, and lively personality. At first glance, they looked like a happy couple enjoying a normal weekend getaway. But if you looked closer, there were strange things. Except for Lee Eun-hae, Yoon didn't know anyone else in the group. They were all his wife's friends. Even stranger, among these men were 2 who were having affairs with his wife, Cho Hyun-soo, 30, and someone called A. These relationships had been going on throughout Yoon and Lee's marriage, but the kind-hearted husband seemed completely unaware. The first suspicious signs. As soon as they arrived at the valley, Lee's friends started inviting Yoon to swim. This was extremely strange, because everyone knew Yoon couldn't swim and had a terrible fear of water. Since childhood, he had been afraid of water and never participated in any water activities. Yoon politely but firmly refused. However, what surprised everyone was that Lee Eun-hae, his wife, was the one most aggressively pushing her husband to get in the water. She kept saying, "Come on, get in, it's just for fun. Don't disappoint everyone." In the video recorded at 6 p.m., you could clearly see Yoon in a state of real panic. He kept pleading, "Don't do this. Don't force me. I'm really afraid of water." His voice was trembling, his face pale. But no one in the group cared about his fear. Most notably, on the shore, Lee Eun-hae not only failed to comfort her husband, but laughed gleefully when she saw him panicking. That smile wasn't the loving smile of a wife, but rather the smile of someone enjoying another's suffering. This video was later posted online and attracted over 5 million views within a week, causing Korean public opinion to be extremely outraged by Lee Eun-hae's cruel attitude. The fatal night. At 8 p.m., darkness had fallen over Gapyeong Valley. The light from the lamps was very dim. Visibility was severely limited. Everyone had prepared their belongings to go home after a day of fun. But right then, Lee Eun-hae suddenly made a suggestion that surprised everyone. "Why don't we dive into the water one last time at night? It'll be a really interesting experience." This was an extremely dangerous proposal. Diving at night in an area without adequate lighting, with people who weren't professional divers. But strangely, 4 out of 5 people immediately agreed to this proposal. Only one person refused. That was Yoon. He begged, "Honey, it's already dark. I can't see anything underwater. I'm really scared. Let's go home." But the pressure from the group was too great. Lee Eun-hae, Cho Hyun-soo, and the others kept persuading and pressuring him. They said Yoon lacked courage, was disappointing everyone, didn't know how to have fun. Finally, under pressure from his wife and her friends, Yoon was forced to agree to participate. Notably, the first 2 people to enthusiastically agree with Lee's proposal, Cho Hyun-soo and A, were her secret lovers. Was this a prearrangement, accident, or conspiracy? According to the group's testimony, Cho Hyun-soo and A jumped from a rock about 4 meters high into a water area about 3 meters deep first. Then they coaxed Yoon, who couldn't swim and was in a state of panic, to also jump without any safety equipment. Yoon fell into the water and immediately went into a state of panic. He struggled violently, crying out desperately for help. According to the autopsy results later, Yoon's lungs had a lot of air bubbles, proving he fought to survive for a long time underwater. But strangely, Lee Eun-hae, the person closest to her husband, only about 5 meters away, claimed she didn't hear his cries for help. Meanwhile, another person on the trip, standing much farther away, insisted they heard what seemed to be Yoon's cries. By basic logic, at a distance of only 5 meters, in the relatively quiet space of the valley at night, not hearing the desperate cries for help of a drowning person is completely illogical. Moreover, police later discovered that Lee Eun-hae was actually a very good swimmer. So why didn't a skilled swimmer go down to save her drowning husband right before her eyes? Finally, when rescue forces arrived, they found Yoon's body. Because they found no signs of external impact, police initially concluded this was an accidental drowning. Or the mystery of timing. What made investigators most suspicious was the timing of the accident. After studying the insurance contracts, they discovered an unbelievable coincidence. Yoon died at 8:24 p.m. on June 30th, 2019. But according to the insurance policy terms, if the renewal premium wasn't paid on time, all insurance policies would automatically cancel at midnight the same day, meaning just 4 hours after Yoon died. In other words, if Yoon had lived 4 more hours without paying the renewal premium, all $800 million won in insurance money would have been lost. But because he died before this time, Lee Eun-hae became the legal beneficiary of the entire amount. This could be the most miraculous coincidence in history, or an extremely sophisticated, calculated plan. Insurance company's suspicion. When Lee Eun-hae submitted a claim request, the insurance company immediately felt something was wrong. They conducted an investigation and discovered many suspicious signs. The timing of death coincided too perfectly with the insurance expiration. Yoon was very afraid of water, but drowned. Lee showed no grief and lived very comfortably after her husband's death. Based on these findings, the insurance company refused to pay and began investigating Yoon's death more deeply. Lee Eun-hae turns to the media. Being denied insurance payment, Lee Eun-hae felt angry. In November 2019, she decided to approach the famous investigative TV program Unanswered Questions on SBS to accuse the insurance company of fraud. On air, Lee presented herself as a pitiful victim. She cried, telling about her difficult life after her husband's death, about having to live on social welfare in an empty house. She said she and her husband always had deep, loving feelings, and the insurance company's refusal to pay had left her in desperate circumstances. The program crew was initially very sympathetic to Lee. They decided to support her in demanding justice from the insurance company, and began investigating the case. The broadcaster's investigation and horrifying discoveries. But when investigative reporters began digging deeper, they discovered things completely opposite to Lee Eun-hae's account. First discovery. Lee wasn't living in poverty as she claimed. In fact, she still frequently traveled, dined lavishly, shopped for luxury goods, and hung out with friends. Second discovery. Lee and Yoon's marriage was nothing like she described. Through interviewing acquaintances, the program crew discovered this was an extremely strange and abnormal marriage. Third discovery. Yoon actually lived in poverty after marriage, despite having a stable salary. He frequently had to borrow money from colleagues to buy basic food. Fourth discovery. Lee had affairs with at least 2 other men throughout the marriage, and these people were all present on the fatal trip. The strange marital life exposed. When delving into the couple's life, investigators discovered a picture completely different from what Lee Eun-hae had told. Yoon and Lee married in 2016, but this wasn't a normal marriage. They didn't hold a wedding or reception, just quietly registered their marriage at a notary office. After marriage, Yoon's parents gave the couple 100 million won to buy a house. Yoon also borrowed an additional 40 million won to buy a fairly spacious and comfortable house. But Lee didn't allow her husband to live in this new house. Instead, she forced Yoon to rent a small basement room near his company to live alone. The new house was entirely for Lee to invite friends over to gather and have fun. They only met on weekends, and only when Lee wanted. Yoon never got to meet his wife's family. In fact, Lee's family and friends didn't even know she was married. When hanging out with friends, Lee introduced Yoon as a close older brother, not her husband. Brutal financial control. The most horrifying discovery was how Lee controlled Yoon's finances. Although Yoon had a stable salary of 64 million won per year, he had to hand over his entire salary to his wife. Lee would then decide how much money to give her husband for monthly expenses. Yoon's colleagues shared that after marriage, he became completely different. Before, Yoon never had to borrow money from anyone, but after getting married, he frequently had to borrow small amounts that were pitifully small. There were times Yoon had to borrow 3,000 won, about $2.50, to buy a bowl of instant noodles because he was hungry. Sometimes he borrowed money to buy a bottle of water. This meant that Yoon, an engineer with stable income, didn't have enough money to cover the most basic living needs. Police later released text messages between Yoon and colleagues that caused Korean public opinion to be extremely outraged. I transferred all my salary to Eun-hae, and now I'm completely broke. Can you transfer 10,000 won to me? I have nowhere left to borrow money to buy a lunchbox and water. Yoon even lost significant weight, losing 14 kilograms in just 2 weeks due to lack of food. The car that Yoon bought was also taken over by Lee for her use, but the monthly installment payments and gas were still Yoon's responsibility. The suspicious insurance plan. During 2 years of living together, Lee had mined about 200 million won from Yoon with various excuses. But the most frightening thing was that she had started planning to kill her husband right from when they first got married. 5 months after their wedding, in August 2017, Lee purchased up to 6 life insurance policies for Yoon, with a total value of 800 million won. What was unusual was that all these insurance policies had Lee as the sole beneficiary. When she lacked money to pay insurance premiums, Lee coaxed and forced Yoon to pay the remaining amounts. Yoon had no idea he was paying for insurance policies that would make him a murder target. Every month, Yoon had to pay up to 700,000 won in insurance premiums, a large amount compared to what he was allowed to spend on himself. This made his life even more difficult, while Lee enjoyed a luxurious life with her husband's money. The dark past of the angel. To better understand Lee Eun-hae, investigators dug into her past. They discovered a tragic story about the fall of an angel. Lee Eun-hae was born in February 1991 in Incheon to a poor family. Both her parents were disabled, living in a dilapidated house of only 20 square meters. The family lived on social welfare. In 2002, when Lee was 11, the famous home renovation program Love House selected her family for a special episode. On television, Lee appeared as a lovely, obedient, and very filial girl. Despite living in difficult circumstances, she remained very optimistic and never complained about life. What impressed viewers most was Lee's promise. "When I grow up, I will try to help people in difficult circumstances like my family." The program aired and caused a big sensation. Lee was loved by the Korean public and called South Korea's angel. But time passed, and the angel disappeared. From age 15, while still in high school, Lee began dating various men. She quickly learned how to use her appearance and charm to make money from men. Relationship with a criminal. In the following years, Lee became acquainted with Cho Hyun-soo, a man with a criminal record. Cho Hyun-soo was a familiar face at police stations for frequently stealing and robbing people's property. Since youth, he had appeared in court 5 times for various charges. Lee and Cho developed an illicit romantic relationship that lasted many years. Cho became Lee's effective accomplice in scamming and making money from male victims. From 2010 to 2016, Lee had romantic relationships with various men. What's frightening is that some of these people died in mysterious accidents, and Lee received large insurance payouts each time. Previous murder attempts. The most horrifying thing police discovered was that Lee had attempted to kill Yoon at least 2 times before the fatal drowning. First attempt, February 2019. Lee invited Yoon to a B&B in Gangwon Province for a belated honeymoon. There, she tried to poison her husband by mixing pufferfish blood and testicles into his food. Pufferfish contains tetrodotoxin, an extremely dangerous toxin that can cause death with just a very small amount. Fortunately, Yoon only got stomachache and vomiting. He was taken to the hospital and recovered after a few days of treatment. Second attempt, May 2019. Lee invited Yoon fishing at a fishing pond in the Seoul suburbs. While fishing, Yoon accidentally slipped and fell into the pond. Fortunately, another fisherman nearby jumped in and saved Yoon in time. After 2 unsuccessful murder attempts, Lee decided to plan a more perfect third attempt. Shocking video and public attention. When the Unanswered Questions program aired in December 2020, all of South Korea was shocked. Their investigative video quickly became the most viewed content online and caused uproar across all social media. Especially the video footage showing Yoon pleading not to go into the water while Lee laughed gleefully outraged millions of Koreans. This video got over 5 million views in just 1 week. Korean public opinion erupted. Hashtags about this case became trending #1 on all social media. People demanded police reinvestigate the case and punish Lee Eun-hae. Official investigation and arrest warrant. From here, Korean police decided to reopen the investigation into the drowning at Gapyeong Valley. The Incheon District Prosecutor's Office also joined with strong investigative forces. Police spent 9 months investigating, and results showed this wasn't an accident, but an organized murder. Decrypted telegram messages showed Lee had planned to kill Yoon for a long time. On December 13, 2021, the Incheon District Prosecutor's Office officially summoned Lee Eun-hae and Cho Hyun-soo for questioning. However, after the first interrogation session, both were temporarily released home and ordered not to leave the area. This was a serious mistake by police. That very night, Lee and Cho fled their homes and disappeared completely. Nationwide manhunt. On March 30, 2022, Korean police officially issued a nationwide arrest warrant for Lee Eun-hae and Cho Hyun-soo. This was one of the most watched manhunts in Korean history. The whole country followed this pursuit. Photos of the two suspects were posted everywhere. All banking, transportation, and communication activities were closely monitored. During 3 weeks on the run, Lee and Cho lived like homeless people. They didn't dare use bank cards, didn't dare contact anyone, and had to hide in different places each night. Finally, they decided to hide in an abandoned office building in downtown Seoul. On April 16, 2022, police received a phone call from Lee Eun-hae's father reporting the two's hiding location. When arrested, both were in pitifully haggard condition. They had lost a lot of weight, their faces gaunt from living only on bottled water for many days. Trial and historic verdict. After arrest, Lee Eun-hae and Cho Hyun-soo were transferred to the Incheon District Prosecutor's Office to begin the trial process. This was considered one of the most watched trials in Korean legal history. Throughout the interrogation process, Lee constantly cried and denied all charges. She insisted she was innocent, that Yoon's death was truly a regrettable accident. She even declared that she truly loved her husband and never intended to kill him for insurance money. However, the evidence collected by police and prosecutors was overwhelming. Decrypted telegram messages, surveillance videos from multiple locations, witness testimonies, autopsy results, and financial analysis all pointed to one conclusion. This was an organized, planned, and extremely brutal murder. In October 2022, Incheon District Court issued its first instance verdict. Lee Eun-hae, life imprisonment for murder to seize property, insurance fraud, and domestic violence. She must also wear an electronic location tracking device for 20 years. Cho Hyun-soo, 30 years imprisonment for complicity in murder and insurance fraud. Also must wear a tracking device for 20 years. In court, the judge gave harsh rebukes. Defendant Lee Eun-hae turned marriage, the most sacred thing for humans, into a murder weapon to satisfy her greed. The defendant took the life of a kind, honest man just for money. This is an unforgivable crime. Lee and Cho both appealed, but didn't stop blaming each other. In April 2023, Seoul High Court heard the appeal and upheld the original verdict. Finally, in September 2023, South Korea's Supreme Court officially upheld the verdict. Lee Eun-hae, life imprisonment. Cho Hyun-soo, 30 years imprisonment. Both must wear electronic location tracking devices for 20 years. This was the first time in Korean history a woman was sentenced to life imprisonment for killing her husband to seize insurance money. The verdict was considered fair and appropriate for the brutality of the crime. Other accomplices also prosecuted. Besides Lee and Cho, another man named A, 32 years old, who was also present on the fatal trip, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for aiding and abetting murder. The appeals court emphasized, although only aiding and abetting, the defendant's role in the case was not small. The defendant knew Lee intended to kill Yoon, but didn't prevent it, even participating in pressuring the victim to jump into the water. Conclusion. The Lee Eun-hae case, from South Korea's angel to brutal killer, is a tragic story about human downfall and the power of greed. From a lovely 11-year-old girl with the promise to help people in difficulty when I grow up, Lee Eun-hae became one of the most terrifying criminals in Korean history. She turned love into a weapon, turned marriage into a death trap, and turned a kind man's trust into a path to death. Yoon Sang-yeop, with clear eyes behind thick glasses and a gentle smile, paid with his very life for blind trust. He lived his final years in poverty, exploited, and ultimately murdered by the very person he loved most. His story is a painful warning about how blind love can become. But this case also shows the light of justice. The Unanswered Questions program proved that independent journalism can be a voice for those who cannot protect themselves. Korean public opinion showed strong solidarity in demanding justice for the victim. Finally, justice was served. Lee Eun-hae and her accomplices received appropriate punishment. But the pain of the victim's family, the loss of an innocent life, can never be compensated. Lessons from the case: warning signs of economic violence in families, complete control of partners' finances, isolating victim from family and friends, creating financial dependence, using emotions to manipulate. Things to note: never hand over all finances to one person, even if it's your spouse. Maintain relationships with family and friends. Be cautious of unusually valuable insurance contracts. Trust your instincts when you feel something isn't right. As we end this story, remember that in life, kindness and trust are precious values. But we also need to know how to protect ourselves. Love wisely, trust carefully, and always listen to your instincts. Thank you all for following the case files today. If this story means something to you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other intriguing cases. Leave a comment to let us know which case you want to learn about in the next episode. And don't forget, in this world full of mysteries, only truth can bring justice. We'll see you again in the next episode of the Case Files. Take care and always be careful, and always